You won't believe what we uncovered. It's the kind of story that will keep you up at night, wondering just how much the world around us can hide in plain sight. You're about to hear about a boy, sitting in front of his computer, doing what millions of others do every day, streaming on Twitch. But this wasn't your average gaming session, and it certainly wasn't a run-of-the-mill evening for anyone involved. What started as a typical night of gaming ended up revealing something that not only went unnoticed by the police but was sitting right there, hidden in front of their eyes. It's the kind of discovery that forces us to ask, just how many other things are slipping through the cracks, unnoticed, unexamined, and ignored? So, why does this matter to you? Why should you stick around? Because the answer to the mystery behind this Twitch stream is something you won't expect, and it's something you can't afford to miss. You clicked on this video for a reason, right? You felt the pull of the title. You're curious. You want to know the secrets we uncovered and how a simple gaming session turned into a turning point in a case that had the police stumped. Trust me when I say that if you're feeling that pull right now, the mystery has already begun. But here's the thing, we're only just getting started, and by the end of this video, you'll have answers you won't be able to stop thinking about. Before we go deeper into this, let me tell you something personal. When I first came across this story, I thought it was just another one of those wild online rumors that float around on the internet. The kind of thing you hear and just scroll past. But something about this one stuck with me. The boy in question, let's call him Jake, wasn't some random kid. He was just another gamer, innocently streaming his game on Twitch, interacting with viewers, doing what he loved. But unbeknownst to him, his stream was about to capture something that would shock not just his followers, but an entire police department. What did Jake see? What did his camera catch? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unravel today. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're Jake. You've set up your camera, launched your stream, and the usual group of viewers start popping into chat and throw some donations your way. Everything seems normal at first. You're focused on the game, bantering with your followers, lost in that world of pixels and points, the sound of your voice echoing in your headphones as you discuss everything from strategy to the latest trends. It's just another ordinary night. But here's where the story takes an eerie turn. Something happens on stream that doesn't belong there. Something that shouldn't be there at all. It's small at first, barely noticeable to anyone but Jake, who keeps streaming. But as the hours pass, things start to shift. A subtle change, a creeping unease. A sound. A shadow. A figure. You see, Jake had unwittingly caught something in the background of his stream. But it wasn't a glitch, and it wasn't a prank. It was real, and it was dangerous. And no one knew it until the footage was analyzed later. You're probably wondering, how could something like this go unnoticed? How could something so significant slip by the police, the authorities who are supposed to catch the bad guys? Here's where the first mystery lies. The police had already looked into this case. They had combed through the evidence, interviewed witnesses, and even gone through the footage they had on hand. But somehow, they missed it. They missed the crucial detail that Jake had unwittingly captured on his stream. You have to ask yourself, what did the police overlook? How could something this important go unnoticed? And why was it Jake's Twitch stream that ended up revealing it? But here's where things get even more fascinating and unsettling. When Jake discovered what he had captured, he didn't immediately realize the gravity of the situation. It was only when some of his more observant followers pointed it out to him that he began to piece everything together. His viewers, many of whom were experts in different fields, some worked in technology, others were deep into crime analysis, and some had just an uncanny knack for spotting the tiniest details, began to flood his chat with messages, urging him to look at the footage more closely. At first, Jake thought it was just a joke, a fan theory, or a coincidence. But when he replayed the footage, his stomach dropped. What he saw was unmistakable. There, in the background, something, or rather, someone, was hidden in plain sight. It was a figure, standing there for just a few seconds, but in those few seconds, the entire course of the investigation changed. What the police had missed was sitting right there on Jake's stream the whole time. So, what exactly did Jake see? What was so shocking about this? Why didn't the police catch it when they reviewed the footage? And what happens when the truth comes out? To answer these questions, we need to go back. way back. Because this story isn't just about a boy and his Twitch stream. It's about a series of events that led up to this moment. It's about the investigation, the people involved, and the hidden connections that no one saw. It's about the chilling possibility that things may not always be what they seem. And most importantly, it's about the question that haunts us all. How many more clues are out there, waiting to be found, that no one's looking for? Stick with me, because what you're about to uncover is just the beginning. I'll take you through every detail of this shocking discovery, piece by piece, as we dive deep into the footage, the investigation, and the bizarre twist of fate that led to the revelation no one saw coming. You'll get to experience it all through Jake's eyes, feel the weight of the moment, and witness firsthand how one simple Twitch stream exposed something the police had completely missed. Trust me, by the end of this video, you won't just know the answer to the mystery. You'll be left wondering how many other things, hidden in plain sight, have gone unnoticed in your own life. How many small details right in front of us could be the key to solving something much bigger. And as we continue, remember this: the truth is closer than you think, and it's not always where you expect to find it. So, hold on tight, because things are about to get real. What Jake saw on that stream is something you won't be able to forget, and the consequences of what comes next will change everything. But before I reveal what was on that stream, let's go back to where it all started. Jake wasn't someone who stood out in the traditional sense. He wasn't a viral celebrity or a high-profile social media influencer. In fact, when you first look at his Twitch channel, you might have dismissed him as just another gamer streaming to a handful of viewers. His follower count wasn't massive, and his viewership wasn't breaking records. But for those who spent any amount of time in Jake's chat, it became clear that he had something special, a certain charm that made him relatable. He wasn't trying to be anything he wasn't. He didn't have scripted one-liners or flashy edits. It was just him, his game, and his genuine, sometimes awkward, but always honest interactions with his community. His channel had a sense of intimacy to it, something rare in today's crowded streaming world. The viewers who came back night after night didn't just tune in for the gaming, they tuned in because they felt like they knew Jake. No explanation. Just gone. Jake immediately contacted Twitch support team, but they claimed there was nothing they could do. The footage had been erased from their servers, and there was no record of who or what initiated the removal. At first, Jake thought it was a glitch. Maybe it was a mistake. But deep down, a growing sense of unease told him that something wasn't right. He'd been careful to follow Twitch's rules, and the video had only been flagged because of its content that was now mysteriously missing. He wasn't the only one who had seen it, though. Jake's viewers had downloaded and saved the video the moment they noticed the strange figure behind him. They had it, and that was the only reason the video even existed anywhere beyond Twitch's reach. But there was something unsettling about the people who had saved it. Some of them were fans he didn't recognize, ones who only seemed to pop up after the incident. They were quiet about what they'd seen, often responding in cryptic ways when Jake asked them for help. It didn't take long for Jake to realize that the people he thought were his supporters might not be who they appeared to be. Things escalated quickly after that. A week later, Jake received a letter, an envelope with no return address, only his name written in smudged ink. Inside, there was a single note: "Stop looking, or you'll be next." The note sent a chill down his spine. He had no idea who could have sent it, or why, but it was clear that someone didn't want him digging deeper. Someone didn't want him asking questions. And that's when Jake realized he wasn't just up against a strange coincidence or some bizarre prank. This was bigger. This was real. And whoever was behind it wasn't going to let him find the answers. Despite the warning, Jake couldn't stop. He needed to know what was really going on. The more he thought about the figure in the background of his stream, the more he felt like he was missing something. That shadow, it wasn't just a random glitch or a trick of the light. It was too deliberate. Too intentional. There was something familiar about it, something that made him uneasy every time he tried to piece it together. And so, Jake kept pushing forward, trying to make sense of what he had seen and what was happening around him. But the further he went, the more he began to uncover things he didn't want to know. Secrets about his own past. About people he thought he could trust. Jake's closest friend, Kyle, had been there for him since high school. They'd played games together for years, shared countless memories, and had always been there to back each other up. But lately, Jake had started to notice odd behavior from Kyle. He was acting distant, avoiding eye contact, and even when they spoke on the phone, there was an edge to his voice that Jake hadn't heard before. One evening, Jake decided to meet Kyle in person to talk things through. But when he arrived at Kyle's apartment, he was greeted with a strange sight. Kyle's door was ajar, the lock barely hanging on its hinges. The apartment inside was a mess, with papers scattered across the floor and furniture overturned, as if someone had been searching for something. And then Jake found something that stopped him dead in his tracks, a notebook, filled with notes about Jake, about the disappearances, and most disturbingly, about the exact same Twitch stream that had set everything in motion. Kyle had been following Jake's investigation. But why? The pages in the notebook weren't just scribbles, they were detailed, obsessive. There were references to Jake's past, his family, and even his Twitch viewers. It was clear that Kyle had been digging into things Jake had never even mentioned to him. But when Jake confronted Kyle about it, Kyle's reaction was unexpected. He denied everything, claimed the notebook wasn't his, and rushed to dismiss Jake's concerns. He became defensive, and for the first time in their friendship, Jake saw a side of Kyle that was cold, almost threatening. Jake left Kyle's apartment that night feeling more lost than ever. Was his best friend involved in something sinister? Was he hiding something from him? Was Kyle somehow connected to the disappearances? Or was he just as much a victim as Jake, caught up in something bigger than both of them? The trust he had once placed in his friend was crumbling before his eyes, and with it, any sense of security he'd once had. As Jake tried to process everything, another unexpected message came through on his phone. This time, it wasn't from a fan or an anonymous number. It was from his own mother. She didn't usually reach out to him like this, not without a reason. The message was short and to the point. Jake, you need to stop. It's too dangerous. She didn't say what was too dangerous. She didn't elaborate. Just those words, simple but heavy, filled with a warning he couldn't ignore. And for the first time, Jake wondered if maybe the truth was something he wasn't ready to face. What had his mother known that he didn't? Why was she telling him to back off now? He was stuck in a web of questions, and every time he thought he had an answer, another piece of the puzzle disappeared. He was running out of time. The figure in the background of his Twitch stream, what was it really? Was it a person? Or something else? Was Kyle hiding more than just his suspicions? And what about his mother's warning? Was it a plea for his safety, or a deeper connection to the secrets surrounding him? Jake was closer than ever to the truth, but with every step he took forward, the walls seemed to close in around him. And just when he thought he couldn't go any further, a call came in, shaking him to his core. One of his viewers had been found, missing, just like the others. And what they found on their phone? A recording of Jake's stream, looping. But this time, it wasn't just the figure in the background. It was something else entirely, something he hadn't seen before. Something that made his heart stop. What was it? And more importantly, why was it following him? The discovery of the recording on his viewer's phone sent Jake into a spiral of confusion and fear. The more he stared at the screen, the less he understood. What he had seen before, the shadowy figure in the background of his stream, wasn't the same now. There was something darker, something more unsettling in the footage. The figure wasn't just standing there anymore. It was moving. Slowly, deliberately, but with a purpose. And then, at the very end of the clip, the figure's face, though blurry and distorted, seemed to turn directly towards the camera, as though it was looking at Jake. It wasn't just a glitch. It wasn't just a trick of the light. This was something else, something far beyond the scope of what he had ever expected to encounter. The question now was, who or what was this thing, and why was it fixated on him? The worst part was that this wasn't the first time Jake had felt that ominous presence. There had been moments in the past few weeks, fleeting, but undeniable, when he had felt eyes on him, even when he was alone. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow that flickered at the edge of his vision, seemed to pulse with a sense of urgency, as if whatever was out there was getting closer, more aware of him. But the recording on his viewer's phone was the final straw. It was evidence. It was undeniable. The figure was hunting him, and it wasn't stopping. Just as Jake tried to piece together what was happening, a new, disturbing development surfaced, one that involved his ex-girlfriend, Emily. Emily and Jake hadn't spoken much since their breakup months ago, but they had remained on good terms. She wasn't involved in the online world as much as Jake was, preferring a quieter life outside of the spotlight. But lately, Jake had noticed her acting strange. She'd stopped responding to his texts, and when they did briefly talk, her tone was distant, almost evasive. He'd chalked it up to her moving on, but now, after the strange events surrounding his stream, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When Emily's name popped up on his phone one night, he nearly didn't answer it. But something told him he should. When he picked up, Emily's voice was strained, tinged with panic. "Jake, I think I've seen it too. The figure from your stream. She broke off, taking a shaky breath. "I didn't want to call you. I didn't want to drag you back into this mess, but it's been following me. The same figure. The same eyes. It's been in my dreams. I can't sleep, Jake. I can't escape it." Her words were fragmented, as though she was struggling to make sense of something that was slowly unraveling around her. But the most chilling part wasn't just the terror in her voice, it was the fact that she had seen the figure, too. Emily had no connection to Jake's stream, no reason to be involved in any of this. And yet, somehow, she had become another piece of the puzzle, whether she wanted to be or not. Jake tried to calm her down, asking her to explain exactly what she'd seen, but every time he brought up specifics, Emily's responses grew more disjointed, as if she couldn't articulate what was happening to her. She was terrified, and Jake could hear the desperation in her words, as though she was on the edge of losing control. The more she spoke, the more Jake realized that this wasn't just about him anymore. Whoever, or whatever, was out there, it was targeting anyone connected to him. Emily's involvement wasn't a coincidence. And that terrified him. Was she the next person on the list, or was this something deeper, something personal that reached into his past? Trying to process what Emily had said was like trying to untangle a knot that kept getting tighter with every new thread. But it wasn't just Emily who was starting to feel the pressure of whatever was stalking Jake. In the days that followed, Jake's phone buzzed with another unexpected message, this time from his mother. But unlike the cryptic warning from before, this message was blunt, almost pleading. "I know who's behind this. Please stop before it's too late." Jake froze when he read those words. Who was his mother talking about? Was this about Kyle? Was he involved in this somehow? Or was there someone else in Jake's life who had a hidden connection to all of it? For years, Jake had trusted his mother, always thinking she was the one person who would never keep secrets from him. But now, it seemed like she was holding back something crucial. He tried to call her back immediately, but she didn't pick up. He felt like he was being suffocated by the weight of it all, the shadows, the cryptic messages, the sense of being watched at every turn. He knew he had to confront his mother, but she was nowhere to be found. Jake showed up at her house, knocking on the door, but there was no answer. When he let himself in, the house was eerily quiet. His mother's car was in the driveway, but there was no sign of her inside. It wasn't like her to leave without telling him. As he walked through the rooms, looking for any sign of her, he stumbled upon something that stopped him cold, a small, leather-bound journal, left on the coffee table. It was open, and the page it rested on was full of cryptic notes. Jake recognized some of the words, phrases he had heard before in connection with the disappearances. The journal spoke of a hidden group, a secret past that Jake's mother had kept from him. But the most chilling part of all was the final line written in shaky handwriting. It's too late for him. His already marked. Jake felt his stomach churn. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of everything. His mother's journal, the warnings, Emily's terrified phone call, it was all pointing in one direction, but Jake couldn't quite see what that direction was. The pieces were scattered, and no matter how hard he tried to put them together, they never fit. As Jake left his mother's house, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was an email, sent from an anonymous account. The subject line was short and to the point, "It's already begun." Inside the email was a link to a private video, one that Jake had never seen before. He clicked it without hesitation, his heart pounding as the video loaded. But what he saw shook him to his core. It was a recording, not of his stream, but of something else, a hidden camera, focused on Jake's own bedroom. The room was dark, but the faint outline of a figure could be seen in the corner of the frame, standing motionless, just like the figure in the background of his stream. The screen flickered, and then the figure slowly stepped forward into the light. And it was then that Jake's blood ran cold. The face of the figure, now unmistakably clear, wasn't some random person. It was someone Jake knew. Someone he trusted. Someone who had been in his life longer than he realized. And that's when it hit him, the figure wasn't hunting him. It had been following him from the very beginning. And the truth was worse than anything he could have ever imagined. Jake's hands trembled as he stared at the screen. The video had left him frozen, unable to think, unable to breathe. The figure wasn't just someone he knew, it was someone close, someone he trusted more than anyone else. His best friend Kyle. Kyle, the person who had been by his side through everything, had been in his room, watching him, possibly even manipulating everything that had happened since the beginning. It was too much to process in one sitting. Jake had to force himself to look away from the screen, but it was as if the image was seared into his mind. Kyle's face, eerily calm, staring right into the camera, his eyes unblinking, never once breaking the chilling silence. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. The last time he'd seen Kyle had been just a few days ago, and they had acted like everything was normal, like nothing strange had happened between them. But now Jake realized that their friendship, everything he thought he understood about it, had been a lie. Kyle had been following him. Watching him. He had been involved in the strange events from the start, and Jake had been too blind to see it. He thought he knew who the enemy was, but it turned out that the person who had been standing beside him all along had been his greatest threat. A knock on his door broke through his thoughts, sending a spike of terror through his chest. It was late. Too late for anyone to be visiting. Heart racing, Jake stood up, his legs unsteady beneath him as he made his way to the door. Who could it be? Was it Kyle, coming to confront him? Was it someone else who knew too much? Or had things gotten even darker, to the point where the figure was now standing right outside his door? He slowly reached for the doorknob, hesitating for just a moment before pulling it open. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. Standing there, drenched in rain, was his mother. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't speak at first. She just stood there, breathing heavily as if she'd run all the way here. Something was horribly wrong, and Jake could feel it. There was a look in her eyes, something that made him shiver, something that said she knew more than she was letting on. Before Jake could say anything, his mother pushed past him, barging into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. "You're in danger," she said, her voice trembling. "I should have told you this before. I should have warned you sooner." Her words came out in a rush, and Jake could hardly keep up with what she was saying. "I didn't think it would get this bad. But it's too late now. You've crossed the line, Jake. It's not just about you anymore." He felt a sense of dread settle deep in his stomach, the air around him growing thick with a tension he couldn't escape. "What do you mean, it's not just about me?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper as he tried to make sense of everything. His mind was racing. His mother, the one person who had always been his anchor, was now saying things that didn't make any sense. She had always been the calm one, the one who kept him grounded when the world around him seemed to tilt on its axis. But now, she looked terrified, utterly terrified. She glanced over her shoulder nervously, then pulled Jake away from the door, closing it softly but quickly, as if she was afraid someone might be listening. "They know," she said, her voice shaking. "The group. They know everything. They've been watching you. They've been watching me too." Her eyes darted around the room as if she was afraid someone was hiding in the shadows. She looked at the floor, her hands wringing together. "It was never just about the stream, Jake. There's more to this, more than you can even begin to understand." Jake's head spun. He felt like he was being suffocated by all the unanswered questions swirling around him. "What group? Who's been watching us?" he asked, struggling to get a coherent thought together. But his mother's only response was a low, guttural sound, a mix between a sigh and a sob. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a deep, unspoken sadness. "I didn't want this for you. I didn't want you to get involved. I didn't think it would come to this." Her voice cracked as she said the words. "You need to leave, Jake. You need to get out of here. Right now." Before he could respond, there was a loud bang at the door, 3 sharp knocks that made the walls of the apartment vibrate. Jake's blood ran cold. His mother's face paled even more, and her grip on his arm tightened. "They're here," she whispered. "They found you." Her voice trembled as she looked back at the door, her entire body frozen in place. Jake didn't know what to do. His mind was racing in every direction, but he couldn't make sense of any of it. How had things gotten this far? Who were they? And what had his mother been hiding from him all this time? She was the last person he thought would be involved in whatever twisted game he had found himself in, but now it seemed like she had been hiding a dark secret of her own. A voice called from the other side of the door, low and menacing. "We know you're in there, Jake. Don't try to run." The voice sent a chill through his bones. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. They were coming for him. And this time, there was no hiding. No escaping. His mother's face twisted with fear, and in that moment, Jake realized just how deep the web of lies went. His entire life had been a lie. His family, his friends, everyone had been keeping secrets. Secrets that were now hunting him. And it was all because of that damn stream. What had started as a strange figure in the background of his Twitch feed had now turned into a nightmare, and there was no way to wake up from it. Jake backed away from the door, his eyes locking with his mother's. She was trembling, but there was a look of resignation in her eyes now, as though she knew there was no way out. She had known what was coming all along. And now, it was too late for both of them. A loud crash echoed through the apartment, and the door burst open. 2 figures stepped into the room, their faces hidden behind dark masks, their bodies silhouetted against the dim light. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. There was nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. And as the figures closed in on him, all Jake could do was stare at them, frozen in fear, as the darkness of the unknown swallowed him whole. As the 2 masked figures advanced toward him, Jake's mind went numb. His mother's trembling face reflected a kind of silent surrender, but before Jake could process anything more, something unexpected happened. One of the figures stepped forward and removed their mask. His heart froze. It wasn't just anyone. It was Kyle. The same Kyle he had once called his closest friend. The same Kyle who had been in the background of his streams, who had been in his life for years. But this Kyle was different. The warmth he had always known in his friend's eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. He no longer looked like the guy who laughed at inside jokes and shared secrets. He looked like a stranger. "Jake," Kyle said, his voice almost gentle, as if he was trying to console him. "You really have no idea, do you? All this time, you thought I was just another player in your little game, didn't you?" Jake's mind was spinning, his heart racing. He had no idea what Kyle was talking about. What game? What was happening? He could barely hear the words as they left Kyle's lips, drowned by the pounding of his own heartbeat. But Kyle didn't stop there. He continued, his tone turning darker, more serious. "You've been asking all the wrong questions, Jake. You've been looking for answers in all the wrong places." The tension in the room was suffocating, and just as Jake was about to speak, his mother suddenly gasped, her face drained of all color. She turned toward Kyle, her eyes wide with shock and something deeper, betrayal. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, you can't be. You were supposed to be." Before she could finish her sentence, Kyle raised a hand, silencing her with a single, chilling motion. "It's too late for explanations," Kyle said, his voice now a low, sinister growl. "The plan is already in motion, and you're both part of it whether you like it or not." Jake's mind was reeling. The plan? What plan? He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the weight of the situation felt like it was crushing him. Kyle wasn't just a bystander. He wasn't an innocent person caught up in the strange happenings. No, Kyle had orchestrated it all. He had been behind the shadows that had been creeping into Jake's life. The figure in his streams? That was Kyle all along. The strange events, the cryptic messages, the eerie feeling of being watched, it was all part of a sick, twisted game that Kyle had set into motion from the start. But just as the full realization hit Jake like a slap to the face, Kyle's next words sent a wave of disbelief through him. "I know you don't understand yet," Kyle said, his voice almost affectionate. "But you will. You're not just the target, Jake. You are the key. Everything that's happening, everything that's been happening, was meant to lead us here. To this moment." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. His world felt like it was crashing down around him. Everything he had thought he knew, every person he had trusted, was suddenly shattered. His mother, Kyle, even his own instincts were betraying him. It wasn't just the stream that was the cause of all this. It wasn't just some random occurrence that had spiraled out of control. Jake wasn't the victim here, he was the central figure in a much larger, much darker game. As Kyle continued speaking, Jake's eyes flicked toward his mother, desperately searching for any sign of reassurance. But her face was blank, resigned to whatever twisted reality Kyle was unveiling. She wasn't fighting him. She wasn't even looking at Jake. It was as though she had known all along that this day would come, and now that it had, she was powerless to stop it. The room felt colder now, the air thick with something Jake couldn't name. His thoughts were spinning. What is happening? Why me? Why my mother? His mind desperately searched for answers, any shred of logic that could explain the nightmare unfolding in front of him. But all he was left with was one terrifying truth: nothing was as it seemed. The answers he had been looking for had always been right in front of him, but he had been too blind to see them. Then, in the midst of his confusion, Jake saw it, the smallest, most subtle detail that had slipped past him earlier. The reason he had felt so uneasy around Kyle for the last few days, the strange unease in his mother's voice when she spoke about him, it all clicked into place. The pieces, though scattered, finally fit together. Kyle wasn't just a friend. He wasn't just someone who had been involved in the chaos. He was a part of something much bigger. A leader of something darker, something far more dangerous. And the worst part, Jake had been unknowingly pulled into it from the very beginning. The Twitch stream, the mysterious figure in the background, the cryptic messages, the warnings, it wasn't random at all. It was all a carefully constructed ruse, designed to manipulate Jake into playing his part. He had been manipulated, lied to, all under the guise of a friendship that was nothing more than a facade. Kyle's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts. "You're not just a victim, Jake. You're the chosen one. You always were. The streams, the games, the followers, they were just tools. You were the key all along." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Jake staggered back, his mind reeling as Kyle's explanation finally started to make sense in the twisted, fragmented way that it all seemed to connect. The plan, the manipulation, the deception, everything had been designed to bring Jake to this moment. And now that it had, there was no turning back. Jake could feel the walls closing in. His world had shifted, and everything he thought he knew about his life, his friends, his mother, it was all a lie. And as Kyle took a step closer, his gaze unwavering and chilling, Jake understood that the nightmare was just beginning. The worst part wasn't the danger, or the betrayal, it was the realization that he wasn't just a player in this game. He was the pawn. And Kyle was the puppet master. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he realized that whatever he thought was happening, whatever he had believed about his life and his stream, it was all part of a much larger scheme that he was powerless to stop. The figure that had haunted his streams, that was just the beginning. The truth was far darker, and it was far too late to turn back now. Jake had no idea what Kyle had planned, but one thing was certain: his life, as he had known it, was over. Jake stood in the middle of the room, barely processing the weight of what Kyle had just revealed. His pulse was erratic, and his breath felt shallow, as if the very air had turned against him. His mind, however, was more chaotic than ever. Every question he'd ever had, every strange feeling, every unnerving moment now made horrifying sense. It was all part of Kyle's plan, a plan Jake had been unknowingly drawn into. And now Kyle had revealed his hand, making it clear that Jake's role in this wasn't just some mistake, it was intentional. Every move had been calculated. His life, his choices, his entire existence had been manipulated by someone he trusted. But it wasn't just Kyle who had been playing him. His mother, too, had been part of this twisted game. That betrayal stung the worst, twisting a knife in his gut he didn't know how to pull out. How could she have kept this from him? How could she have known and said nothing? The woman who had always been his rock, the one person he thought would never betray him, had been part of the very thing that was now suffocating him. Jake, Kyle said again, his voice like an insistent whisper in the chaos of Jake's thoughts. It's time for you to make a decision. I'm giving you a choice, but you need to choose wisely. Because if you don't, everything you care about, everything you've built, is going to fall apart in front of your eyes. His words echoed in the thick silence that hung between them, the threat clear. It wasn't just about Jake anymore. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about losing everything. Kyle's eyes were locked onto him, full of that cold detachment that Jake could no longer recognize. This was no longer the friend he had laughed with, the person who had stood beside him in good times and bad. This was something else entirely. Someone else. Jake's mind raced. What is this? What the hell is going on? He was caught in a web so thick he couldn't see a way out. Every direction he turned, every possibility he explored, felt like it would lead him to something worse. Stay silent and follow Kyle's orders. His heart rejected that idea completely. Confront his mother? It seemed impossible, even though her involvement was undeniable. There was a dark, suffocating weight on his chest, making the very thought of betrayal hit harder than he ever imagined. She had known, she had been complicit in this nightmare, and now she was sitting there, staring at him, her face devoid of emotion. She had no answers for him. No explanations. Not even an apology. Jake, you need to decide, Kyle repeated, his voice insistent. If you want your safety, you'll walk away now, do exactly as I say, and keep your mouth shut. You won't ask any more questions. You won't speak to anyone about this, ever. You'll stay quiet and live in the shadows, and we'll let you go. Jake's eyes shot toward his mother, seeking something, anything that would tell him she didn't agree with Kyle. But her expression was unreadable, her lips pressed tight in a thin line. She said nothing. She stood by, a silent witness to Jake's agony, her gaze not meeting his. She had always been the protector, the one who made sure Jake was safe from harm, but now she was the one who was forcing him to choose between the truth and his own survival. His mind was tearing itself apart as he tried to process the impossible decision ahead. Should I go along with Kyle? Is that the only way I can make it out of this alive? He couldn't live with himself if he did. He knew too much now, and he wasn't just going to let everything he cared about crumble into the hands of people who had used him as a pawn. But the second option, confronting Kyle, confronting his mother, seemed even more dangerous. If he pushed too hard, what would they do? Would they hurt him? Would they destroy everything around him, just to keep the truth buried? He looked at his mother again, desperate for some sign, some indication that she would stand up, that she would speak for him. But she remained silent, her eyes hollow as if she were already grieving the son she had lost in the process. You'll get nothing from her, Jake, Kyle added, his tone almost mocking. She's made her choice. This isn't about you anymore. It never was. His words landed like a slap to Jake's face, his heart sinking into a pit of despair. If there was any doubt left that his mother had been complicit in all of this, it was gone now. Jake was being suffocated by the walls closing in around him. His life, his friendships, his family, they were all being twisted into something unrecognizable. He had spent so long trying to figure out what was going on, but now he realized the truth. This wasn't about him being caught in a web of mysterious events. It was about him being the very center of this web, manipulated from the very start. The truth was even darker than he could have imagined. Jake, Kyle's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts. You have to decide now. Do you want to protect yourself? Or do you want to dig deeper, keep fighting, keep trying to break free? His eyes glinted with something darker now. Because if you keep going down this path, I promise you, no one you care about will come out of this unscathed. Not your mother. Not your friends. Not even you. Jake felt like the floor was falling away beneath him, and his head swam. Every option seemed impossible, every choice a path that would lead him to losing someone or something he loved. Kyle's ultimatum was clear, and it wasn't just an empty threat. There was something in his eyes that told Jake it was real. But his mother, what part was she playing in this? Was she truly beyond saving, or was there something he was missing? The silence between them stretched on, suffocating and heavy. His pulse raced in his ears as Kyle's words hung in the air, like a sword poised above him, ready to drop at any moment. Stay quiet and live in the shadows. That was the easy choice, wasn't it? The choice that would let him escape this nightmare. But at what cost? If he kept quiet, if he let Kyle win, if he let them dictate his life, what would that make him? Who would he be? And if he fought back, if he risked everything to uncover the truth, would there be anything left to fight for? Tears of frustration burned in his eyes. His entire life felt like a lie. The love he had for his mother. The friendship he thought he had with Kyle. All of it was built on false pretenses, and now, Jake was stuck with a choice that no one should ever have to make. His safety. Or the truth. And no matter which way he went, there would be consequences. There would be no winners in this game, only survivors. But Jake was running out of time. And the longer he hesitated, the more his options dwindled. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jake spoke, his voice a mere whisper, filled with disbelief. "What do you want from me, Kyle? What do you really want?" Kyle didn't answer right away. He just looked at Jake with an unreadable expression, and for a brief moment, Jake thought he might hear something that would make sense of it all. But Kyle only smiled, a cold, empty smile that sent chills down his spine. "Choose," Kyle said simply. And with that, the decision was no longer in Jake's hands. Jake's world spun out of control as the pressure of Kyle's ultimatum crushed him. His heart raced as his mind tried to make sense of the chaos. The conspiracy he had stumbled into was no longer just a twisted game or an isolated incident, it was far bigger, far more dangerous than anything he could have imagined. It wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't just his stream or his life hanging by a thread. There were others involved, people he never thought would be a part of this. Friends. Followers. Even his own family. The walls were closing in, and Jake could feel the weight of a hidden truth that was far more insidious than he had thought. He tried to steady himself, to find some way out of this mess, but nothing made sense anymore. How deep does this go? His thoughts collided, jumbled and racing. And then, a moment that would change everything. A sudden crash at the door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. His heart leaped in his chest. Without thinking, he bolted to the door, throwing it open. But it wasn't a random intruder, it wasn't some friend coming to help, no, it was someone far more dangerous than Jake could have prepared for. It was Chris. Chris, the person who had been in the background of Jake's life for months now. Someone who, for the longest time, had seemed like an ally. Chris had always been around, offering advice, working on tech stuff for the stream, even helping Jake when things got tough. They were supposed to be friends. But the look in Chris's eyes told Jake everything he needed to know. There was nothing friendly about him now. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jake demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. Chris didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, his eyes darting to Kyle, who simply gave him a small, knowing nod. "We need to talk, Jake," Chris said, his voice cold. "And you need to understand that you're in way over your head." Jake's stomach sank. He couldn't process what he was hearing. Chris. The betrayal was almost too much to bear. He was working with Kyle this whole time. It felt like the ground was slipping out from under him, as if the very world he'd known had been a lie. His mind screamed in confusion, trying to connect the dots, but nothing made sense. I trusted you," Jake stammered, stepping back, his hands shaking. His chest felt tight. The room seemed to be closing in. This was it. This was the betrayal that would end it all. Chris looked at him, almost apologetically, though his eyes were still filled with that cold detachment. "You weren't supposed to get this far, Jake. You were supposed to stay in the dark. But now you're here, and there's no going back." Jake's heart thudded painfully against his ribs. "What do you mean? What do you want from me?" Chris glanced at Kyle again, almost like he was seeking approval. Kyle gave him another nod, and that was all it took. Chris stepped forward, his voice lower now, filled with something darker. "This goes beyond you, Jake. It's not just about manipulating your stream or getting views. It's about control. Power. What you've stumbled onto, what you're about to find out, is bigger than anything you can handle on your own. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating Jake as he tried to wrap his mind around the implications. Control? Power? What was Chris talking about? And why had he been involved in all of this? The confusion clouded his thoughts, but there was one thing he was certain of now: the conspiracy wasn't just some small-time scheme. It was massive. It had reached far beyond Jake's wildest fears, touching people he had trusted, including Chris and, worse, Kyle. They weren't just random players in a game, they were the architects. They were the ones who had been pulling the strings all along. And as if on cue, everything clicked into place. This wasn't about a stream or a hidden identity. It wasn't even about Jake being some chosen figure. This was about something far darker. Something Jake wasn't supposed to know, but now that he did, there was no way to undo it. The chaos that had invaded his life wasn't a glitch, a strange anomaly, or even a freak accident. It had all been meticulously planned. The eerie messages, the surveillance, the strange people watching him, it was all part of a larger agenda. Before Jake could process any more of this new reality, another voice cut through the tension in the room. It was his mother. "Jake, stop," she pleaded, her voice breaking as she stood up from her seat. "You need to listen to them. You don't understand." Jake's stomach churned as he turned to face her, but the betrayal in her eyes was more than he could bear. She had known all along. She had been complicit in everything, every decision, every manipulation, and now she was trying to push him deeper into the web. She was trying to protect him, but protect him from what? What had she gotten herself into? What was she protecting him from, if not the truth? "Mom," Jake's voice cracked, the raw pain spilling out. "You've been a part of this. You've been lying to me this whole time." She lowered her head, unable to meet his eyes. "I didn't have a choice, Jake. None of us did. It's not what you think." But the words were hollow. Her excuses were empty. Jake couldn't believe it. He had spent his entire life trusting her. She had been the one person he thought would always stand by him. But now, standing here, surrounded by Kyle and Chris, he realized that the family he thought he had was just another illusion. A sharp pain shot through Jake's chest. This wasn't just about the stream anymore. This wasn't just about Kyle or Chris. This was about something far bigger than himself, something that had ensnared everyone he loved, everyone he trusted, and it was suffocating him. Jake's mind raced. What was the next move? How could he stop this? And who could he trust? Everyone around him seemed to be part of the conspiracy, but who else was out there? Were there other people working in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike? Was the entire world just a stage, and Jake the last fool to realize it? The walls seemed to close in even tighter as the weight of the truth bore down on him. There was no escape now. The people who had once been his family, his friends, were the very ones who had been controlling his every move. And they weren't going to stop until they had everything they wanted. Jake could feel the cold hands of desperation gripping him tighter. His survival was no longer about keeping quiet, staying in the shadows, or hiding from the truth. It was about something far darker. And as the seconds ticked by, the pressure mounted. Every choice, every breath, could be the one that sealed his fate. The real question was no longer what Kyle wanted, or why his mother had betrayed him, it was how far would they go to make sure he played his part. And for the first time, Jake realized the answer to that question was far scarier than anything he had imagined. Jake's pulse hammered in his chest as he stood there, staring at Kyle, Chris, and his mother. It was all unraveling in front of him, and the pieces were finally falling into place, too quickly, too shockingly. He couldn't trust anyone. Not Chris. Not Kyle. And certainly not his mother. This wasn't just some twisted conspiracy or a failed game of manipulation. This was something far darker. Something far more sinister than anything Jake had ever imagined. And now, it was time to face it head-on. "Enough of this, Jake," Kyle's voice cut through the tension, sharp as a blade. "You've wasted enough time asking questions. This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. You're not going to win this. You never were supposed to. But now." He let the words hang in the air, like an executioner readying his blow. Jake stood rooted to the spot, his fists clenched at his sides. The rage in him burned hotter now, fueled by the betrayal, the lies, the years of manipulation. He had spent so much of his life trying to make sense of everything, trying to find out what was wrong, and now he saw it. He saw it all, clear as day. His stream, the messages, his friends, even the people closest to him. They had all been pawns in a game so massive, it made his head spin. And the truth he had been searching for all this time? It wasn't just about him. It was about something more profound. Something that stretched far beyond the boundaries of what he had ever thought possible. Bigger than me? Jake spat, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. You think I'm just going to let you walk away from this? You think I'm going to just let you get away with everything? Kyle's smirk widened, like a predator staring down its prey. It's already done, Jake. This was never about letting you win. It was about controlling the game. And we've already won. Jake's mind raced. He couldn't let them get away with this. There had to be something, anything, that could turn this around. His eyes darted around the room, landing on his mother. She hadn't said a word in what felt like hours. Her silence was more damning than anything Kyle or Chris had said. The weight of her betrayal crushed him harder than the fear of facing whatever dark agenda Kyle had planned. He couldn't stand it anymore. Mom, Jake said, his voice raw, pleading. Tell me this isn't true. Please. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were filled with a sadness that could have been mistaken for remorse if he hadn't known better. Jake, she whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't have a choice. None of us did. Jake's heart sank as she spoke the words that shattered everything. The truth had always been right in front of him, but he had been too blinded by trust, by love, to see it. She had been a part of this from the beginning. She had known about Kyle and Chris, about the control they had over his life. And worse yet, she had been complicit. A dark, sickening realization hit Jake like a ton of bricks. His life had never been his own. It had been scripted, engineered, manipulated by people he loved, by people he thought he could trust. The twists, the turns, the endless mysteries, it had all been part of a larger plan, a plan that Jake had unknowingly walked right into. The man he thought was his best friend, the people who had watched his every move, were just pieces in a much larger puzzle. And Jake was nothing but the final, essential piece that would complete it. Kyle took a slow step forward, his gaze never leaving Jake's. You're not going to get out of this, Jake. There's no more running. This is where it ends for you. Jake felt his body tense, a surge of adrenaline rushing through him. He wasn't going down without a fight. Not like this. He had come too far, learned too much to simply let it all slip away. What do you want from me, Kyle? His voice was fierce now, resolute. What's the endgame? Why have you been using me? Kyle's eyes glinted with something cold, almost like he was enjoying this, savoring the fear that flickered in Jake's eyes. Endgame? There is no endgame, Jake. This is just the beginning. We've been waiting for this moment, for you. You think your stream, your followers, even your friends mean anything in the grand scheme of things? They don't. You've been a pawn in our game. But you were always meant to be more. You're the final key to everything. Suddenly, the floor beneath Jake seemed to drop away. The room felt like it was spinning, and a horrible truth settled into the pit of his stomach. He wasn't just a pawn. He wasn't just a random player in their sick game. He was the center of it. The final, crucial element in a conspiracy so vast, so far-reaching, that it could reshape everything. He had been groomed, watched, and manipulated from the very start. All his interactions, all his choices, had been carefully crafted by people who had planned this from the very beginning. And then, just when Jake thought he couldn't take any more, he noticed something Kyle hadn't counted on. It was subtle, just a flicker in Kyle's eyes, but it was enough. There was fear there. And that fear told Jake everything he needed to know. Kyle wasn't invincible. He wasn't some untouchable mastermind. He was terrified. The game was unraveling, and Kyle knew it. With a sudden surge of clarity, Jake lunged toward the desk in the corner, knocking over a stack of papers. His heart raced as he spotted something, a hidden file. It was tucked away, barely visible under a pile of tech gear, but it was there. Jake grabbed it and tore it open, his fingers trembling. Inside was a list of names. Familiar names. Names that sent a chill down his spine. People he had interacted with. People who had been involved with the stream. But there, at the top of the list, was a name that stopped him cold. His own name. Jake was listed as the final subject in something called Project Eclipse. Suddenly, everything clicked. The manipulation, the messages, even the strange sense that he was being watched, it was all part of this larger, darker scheme. And now, the full horror of it hit him. The stream he had been working on, the one that had seemed so innocent, was never meant to entertain. It was an experiment. An experiment to control, to influence, to program. Jake's heart skipped a beat as he looked up, meeting Kyle's eyes once again. "What is this? What have you done?" His voice was barely a whisper, a cold wave of terror washing over him. Kyle's smirk twisted into something darker, and for the first time, there was no joy in his eyes. Just cold, calculating resolve. "It's too late for you, Jake. You're already in it. You've always been in it." And then, just as the reality of it all sank in, Jake felt something snap inside him. The world he thought he knew, the people he trusted, the very life he had built, it was all a lie. And now, with that one final piece of evidence in his hands, Jake knew he had a choice. A terrible, impossible choice. Expose the truth to the world and destroy everyone in his life, or walk away and let Kyle and the others finish what they had started. Either way, there was no going back. The weight of it was unbearable, but Jake's eyes hardened. The end wasn't here yet. Not while there was breath in his body. Not while there was one last shred of hope. He would fight. Even if it meant destroying everything he had ever known. Even if it meant taking down the very people who had once been his family. The final battle was coming, and Jake knew that whatever happened, the game was about to change forever. The dust had settled. The final confrontation with Kyle had been brutal, a battle of wits and willpower that left Jake feeling both victorious and utterly broken. The world around him seemed to exist in a blur, as though he were floating outside of his own life, watching everything unfold from a distance. Kyle was gone, taken down in a way that neither of them had anticipated, but it wasn't the victory Jake had imagined. Nothing about it felt like a win. Instead, it felt like a chapter of his life had closed, and with it, the weight of everything he had learned, the lies, the manipulation, the overwhelming sense of being used, pressed down on him like 1,000 tons of stone. As Jake sat there, staring at the now empty room that had once been his sanctuary, his mind replayed every moment. From the first message he'd received, to the creeping sense of paranoia, to the shock of discovering his own name at the center of a conspiracy so vast it defied belief. The connections had been everywhere, hidden in plain sight, and he had followed them to the bitter end. But now, with Kyle gone, Chris gone, and his mother, well, his mother had vanished, too, a shadow in the night, leaving behind nothing but the aftermath of her own choices. The whole world had been a game, a twisted narrative where the players were never who they seemed to be, and the rules were written by unseen hands. Jake's fingers hovered over his keyboard, staring at the screen. His stream had once been his escape, his passion, a place where he could connect with others, laugh, and share his life. But now, the idea of streaming again felt hollow, empty. His mind kept returning to the file he had found, the Project Eclipse document, and the name at the top, his name. The questions gnawed at him, an insatiable hunger for answers that would never truly be satisfied. Who was behind all of this? Was it just Kyle, just a few rogue players in a game that spiraled out of control? Or was there a larger network, something far more insidious still operating in the shadows? The very thought made his stomach churn. But it wasn't just the unanswered questions that bothered him now. It was the way it all felt too perfect, too precise. Kyle had always known how to push his buttons, how to manipulate him, how to make him play into the narrative he had created. Jake had been nothing but a pawn, or worse, a tool in a much bigger experiment. And yet, even in the face of all that, he had fought back. He had taken control of his own story, at least for now. He had chosen to fight. He had chosen to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As Jake closed his laptop, the silence in the room was deafening. There were no more answers to find, no more clues to follow. For a brief, fleeting moment, he felt peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from closure, but rather the kind that came from simply surviving. From stepping out of the darkness and looking back at the wreckage left behind. He didn't have all the answers, and maybe he never would. But the important thing was that he had fought for himself. He had refused to let the darkness consume him. But just as he allowed himself to exhale, the faintest sound, a ping, echoed from his phone. A notification. Hesitant, Jake picked it up. A new message. No name attached. No number. Just the familiar, unsettling words that had started all of this. "You're not done yet, Jake." His breath caught in his throat. His fingers froze on the screen. A chill crawled down his spine. It was just like before, the same cryptic message, the same sense of dread. For a moment, he almost felt like he was back at square one, like the game was starting over, just when he thought he had escaped it all. He stared at the screen, unsure of what to do next, his mind swirling with 1,000 possibilities. Could it be Kyle, somehow still out there, pulling the strings from behind the scenes? Or was it someone else, someone even more dangerous, more calculating? The thought made his heart race. Jake's hand trembled as he typed a response, his fingers hesitating just for a moment before he hit send. "Who is this?" For a long, agonizing second, there was no reply. The silence stretched out, taut and unbearable. And then, another message appeared. It was short, almost too simple to be real. "You're not alone." The words sent a shock through Jake's system. There was something deeper happening, something far more insidious than he had initially realized. His stomach twisted as he dropped his phone on the table. No. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't over. And for the first time, Jake realized that maybe it never would be. The screen dimmed as the message disappeared into the darkness of his phone. The room felt colder now, quieter than ever before. He was standing at the edge of something much larger than he could have imagined. No longer just a victim, but a player in a game that had no rules, no boundaries, no end. But as he stood there, the weight of everything pressing down on him, one thought anchored him: he wasn't alone. There were others. Others who had been watching, waiting, pulling the strings all along. And Jake had only just begun to realize the true scale of it all. In the silence that followed, Jake felt a flicker of something deep inside him, something that had been buried, perhaps for too long. It wasn't fear. It wasn't dread. It was something stronger. It was resolve. The darkness was far from over. But Jake was done being controlled. Done being manipulated. Whatever came next, he would face it. Because now, he had something the others didn't. He had his own power, his own voice, and he wasn't going to let it be silenced again. The story might have ended for now, but Jake's fight was just beginning. And as the screen in front of him dimmed to black, one thing was clear: the game wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And whatever happened next, the world would be watching.